No doubt that if Bernie Sanders is looking like he's going to run away with it, for the Democratic establishment, that's almost as scary as losing Donald. Like, beating Donald Trump is really important. Almost as important as keeping Bernie Sanders from being the party's nominee. And that will help Mike Bloomberg if that's where we end up in the.
Listen to what he said. Losing to Bernie Sanders is almost as bad as losing to Trump, a man that they, for all practical purposes, are trying to rip out of office. From the Democratic establishment's point of view, losing to Sanders is almost as bad as losing to Trump. Do you doubt him on that? Were you ever unclear of that? Especially if you're a Sanders supporter, were you ever unclear of that? The Iowa caucuses were a shit show, and I've started to believe a biased shit show, meaning a bias towards Pete, overtly so. Meaning, I have a hard time coming away with what we're seeing taking place right now in Iowa and saying, yes, that's a total fair and impartial process. I don't know how anyone could come to that particular assessment. Which part of reality is the conspiracy theory? Because ultimately, mainstream media is looking at this like there's nothing to see here, folks. Mainstream media is utterly deluded. Let me show you this, just so we're clear. Then to put it in perspective. In 2016, the Democratic Party said they can cheat a man in they can cheat a man outright in a smoke-filled room. And nobody can do anything about it because for all intents and purposes, the DNC is a corporation. That's what we're starting with. Meaning that's the history, that's the context. You move forward into the 2020 cycle, and there is consternation all throughout the Democratic establishment with them freaking out. Articles literally, stop Sanders. Ratner, Bloomberg's guy, come out talking about an anti-Sanders coalition coming together. Why? To stop Sanders. Obama. If Sanders starts to run away with it, I'm going to get involved. All of this Democratic process flipping out over how to do one thing. Stop Sanders. Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and guess who else? Pete Buttigieg at those meetings. You have an application in which Pete Buttigieg's campaign invested in. The guy who runs it is a Pete Buttigieg supporter, meaning the guy who created that, the person who's in charge. And the entire board of the company and the people who made the stuff is full of Clintonites and people who hate Sanders. None of this is conjecture. All of what I just said is true. That's the information that's falling out. The app that they put out, and by the way, Pete Buttigieg kills the Des Moines registry poll just before the election because of a question that wasn't necessarily out. That poll had him in third place. The election comes out. No results are out. Buttigieg screams, I won. Takes a victory lap. No election results were out. How's Buttigieg claiming victory? How? Does he know something that we don't particularly know? Now, the Iowa Democratic Party, who has the results, they know what it is, 99%, 100% reporting, they have the results, decides to selectively leak out results. So Sanders' camp, who doesn't trust this process at all, comes out and says we're putting out 60% because the Iowa caucus said they were going to put out 50%. Then the Iowa caucus finds 12% more votes and put out 60%, 62%. But you don't know where these are coming from. You don't know anything else. And they give you the impression that Buttigieg is leading 27 to 25. Boom. On everywhere. Media's talking about it. Buttigieg is the lead. Buttigieg is not leading anything. We don't know what that result is because, according to them, there was 38% still left needed to be reported. I hope you understand what I mean. The fact that they have all the results. This is not a tabulation that is coming in as if we were there on election night. They have all the results. They selectively put out a particular number so media can talk about for a couple of days with Buttigieg in the lead. If they turn out and you find out that at the end of it, Sanders actually did win it because he is winning the popular vote right now, and they've released 70 to 71%, and Buttigieg percentage has gone down. Sanders has gone up moderately. But again, we don't know where the areas they are pulling this stuff entirely from. This number is to some degree fictitious considering they have the entirety of the result. You tell me, is it against or in the interest of the person who wins Iowa outright eventually for them to put the numbers out showing that somebody else potentially won it and have that number going for 2 days. Meaning the number that is in media that people are talking about is Buttigieg is moderately in the lead. And then you find out he's not. But at that point, all the momentum that you were going to get from claiming victory on Iowa, going into New Hampshire, has been killed, outright killed. And you've left a false impression in people's mind, potentially false impression, that Buttigieg was winning. There was no winning. That implies that there's a endpoint to the process. The endpoint to the process had already been reached. They've selectively leaked out information to give you a contrary impression of what might actually be true. This is why Joe Biden was so angry when they put out the numbers, because Joe Biden was sitting in fourth place. Everything that I've just said is true. They did leak out the numbers. They did selectively leak out the numbers when they already had the results. Pete Buttigieg did get the Iowa registry killed. They did say we can cheat a man in open court, in overt, if we wanted to. Tom Perez did fill the convention full of people who are full of Clintonites and people who hate Sanders and lobbyists and warmongers. Tom Perez did change the rules after receiving $325,000 from Bloomberg to allow Bloomberg to participate in the race while excluding all of these other people. Bloomberg with the explicit interest in taking down Sanders. And mind you, that's after he said this to Mike Gravel.
We wanted to give everybody as many chances as we could, and I think that it's a very generous set of rules. But I think the broader issue is that we can't change them later on for the benefit of any candidate. That's kind of our rule number one for us here, and it doesn't matter who it is. We obviously, as Mary Beth attests to, we didn't change them for Senator or for Governor Bullock. And we can't change them for anybody. That is contrary to what I think people expect out of the DNC and what we've committed to in terms of running a transparent and a.
That is contrary to what it means to run a transparent primary. Yes, it indeed is. Didn't stop you from doing it when Bloomberg stopped putting money in your pocket. You have effectively a near bankrupt organization that has a billionaire that's jumping into the process where the entirety of the people running the process hates one guy, wants to stop that one guy. Do I put it past Tom Perez thinking Joe Biden can't carry the load and Bloomberg, being a billionaire for all intents and purposes, can fund his campaign against what he knows is going to be a mountain of cash for the Republican Party? They changed the rule. That's not conjecture. That's something that they actually did. You did have members of the DNC pondering about superdelegates and whether or not they should be brought into the first round. Why? That extreme. Why? Because they needed to stop Sanders. So if you ask me, why do I think that there is a potential for the Democratic Party in Iowa, who again is part of the party that wants by any means necessary to stop Sanders, to take actions that would be against this interest, and not just his interest, everybody else's interest in this race. It just seems like there was a certain bias towards Pete, and that Pete is claiming things based on the information that he can't possibly have. And that this op of, I won, and then the Democratic Iowa Party backing him up with piecemeal information. I tell you this, if Pete won, they would have just put it all out. They already have all the information. Why am I skeptical? Why am I cynical? Yeah, because, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean people aren't trying to get you. Take a listen to this. This is news
Iowa Democrats would
questioning the relationship between Pete and the people who made the application.
not tell us in advance, but we have now determined that it was a company, a company that is affiliated with a company called Acronym, and now Acronym's CEO is married to a senior advisor of Pete Buttigieg, and his brother also works on that campaign in Iowa. So no matter what some people say at this point, that there's no leakage, there's no contamination, there are going to be those who believe that this app itself was
not just that, a fiduciary relationship. Pete Buttigieg's campaign gave tens of thousands of dollars to this particular company. And by the way, Bloomberg's appeal to some like the Democratic Party is not just the 325. It's the money that he gave all down ballot. All of the people, think of all the people in the Democratic Party that Bloomberg can fund, or that he is currently funding, where he is going to get an endorsement for, or at the very least, those people are going to have more money to run their races. It's not just the 325. It's also the ancillary items that a billionaire, what, the ninth richest man could provide. Yes, this smells. This looks dodgy. If you think this is all above board, you should be more cynical. People like to scream incompetence about this stuff, but incompetence is often used as a reason to hide malfeasance. Go back to 2016, Donna Brazile. I'm just going to blow past the welcome to the soapbox. Look at this. This is 2016. Listen to what Donna Brazile says. Debbie was not a good manager. She hadn't been very interested in controlling the party. She let Clinton headquarters in Brooklyn do as it desired so she didn't have to inform the party officers how bad the situation was. How much control Brooklyn had and for how long was still something I had been trying to uncover for the last few weeks. By September 7th, the day I called Bernie, I found the proof and it broke my heart. You think it broke her heart because it was above board? No. But notice her excuse. Debbie was not a good manager. You tell me. Was Debbie not a good manager, or was Debbie irreparably corrupt? Meaning, do you believe that this woman just was bad at her job, or that the fact that she had ran Hillary Clinton's campaign prior might have some relationship between her and Hillary Clinton that goes beyond just her being a bad manager? Incompetence used as an excuse for malfeasance. Put your same lens on what is taking place here in Iowa. Sanders is winning the popular vote. The number of delegates at this point are split 10-10. All right? Do you believe, based on what you know, just of the Democratic Party, of what these people want to do, meaning to stop Sanders by any means necessary, what took place in 2016, what Tom Perez is doing, even putting more, or like I said, the Clintonites on the the campaign committee, all this stuff. Do you believe this is malfeasance or incompetence? You tell me. And are you certain of either answer? And if you're not certain of either answer, is that not a problem in and of itself? Is that not a problem in and of itself? I'm always enamored by people like this. Take a look at this. By the way, this was the old result. 26.9 to 25.1. Warren 18.3. The new results are in from CNN, 70% being in. Buttigieg has dropped 0.1. Sanders has gone up 0.1. Narrow lead, but again, we have no idea what these numbers represent. And that number is fictitious because they already have all the results. They're giving you 70% of 99%. And you think, well, wait, if you have the 99%, why not just release the 99%? They're selectively choosing what to release. That's the point I'm making to you. You have no idea any of this stuff, where this stuff is coming from. You have no idea the new districts that may come up. You may have Bernie encampments. You don't even know if they cherry pick the numbers to give you a particular result just for a day or so to cut any feel or any momentum that the candidate who's leading may get, while at the same token making it look like somebody who didn't win won for the sake of getting some bump in going into New Hampshire. I don't know if they're going to steal it outright, but you don't know either. And that's the problem. The final numbers that they give you, you don't know if those were the final numbers. I don't think Sanders blew this out. He didn't get the huge turnout that you'd have thought he would have needed in order to blow it out. By the same token, it does seem like he won the popular vote. It does seem at the very least he's going to split the delegates. And we still have 70% left to go. It's very possible he wins it outright. His campaign is confident. Between the numbers that the DNC is putting out and Sanders' campaign, I trust Sanders' campaign. By the same token, it is the DNC numbers that are official. My problem here is, how can I trust a process that is starting off this way? First tally, and it starts off like this. a fiduciary and familial relationship with one of the people running in the goddamn campaign. They tried to hide that, by the way. They tried to hide the fact that this organization was full of people who were Clinton backers. They tried to hide the fact that Pete had a fiduciary relationship and a familiar relationship with the company. They just hid that all the way up until the point of the election. Do you know that the application that they were running using a test server? You heard that right. They didn't pay for the application version or the enterprise version that would have allowed them to actually run this successfully. They were running an application that could really only support 200 people being within the application. They didn't pony up the money to actually get the enterprise level of the application. They were running on a testing server. That's the organization. That company right now that Pete has a fiduciary relationship with, that the DNC has been dumping a bunch of money into, that company is trying to scrub their, where is it? Where is it? The company is trying to scrub the record, meaning they're trying to get rid of any notion that they were working with this particular, right here. Shadow Inc. investors, acronym at Higher Ground Labs, are scrubbing the website's info, linking them to the firm behind the app that fueled Iowa caucus chaos last night. We got to cover our trail, dog. We got to cover our trail. That looks bad. Yes, that looks bad because Nevada is not going to touch it. The only point I'm making here is all of this was bad. But why didn't they know that was bad from the beginning? All of this was going to raise questions, whether questions should be raised or not. This stinks. This stinks. So when I look at this and I point out this stinks, and again, incompetence is often used as a cover for malfeasance, I'm not wrong in that. There's nothing that I made up in this process. You may say I'm a bit cynical. You may say I'm insinuating bad behavior as opposed to stupidity. Yes, that is absolutely true. Whether or not this app collapsed on purpose, whether or not they were just incompetent, they certainly started using this situation to leak information to give an impression that may not actually be true. That's my point. That is my point. And if we find out later that Sanders ends up winning this, then their point of this would have been to sap the momentum from Sanders going into New Hampshire. If my name is Bernie Sanders and I lose this, I would ask for this to be scrapped. Because, look, how do you know whatever result comes out for this, even if you win, how do you know the result is legitimate? Now, Sanders say he's not questioning the result. Because fact is, we don't know if the numbers that they put out contradict Sanders' numbers because, again, we don't know what numbers they're using. I hope you understand what I mean. They could be using different numbers that ends up coming to the same effect because you still have 30% outstanding. Democratic Party starting it off. Take a look at this. Final alignment. Bernie Sanders, 37,722 votes. Buttigieg, 31,458 votes. Sanders is winning the popular vote, continued to win the popular vote. Even when they put out the 62%, he was winning the popular vote. That hasn't changed. 26.21% of the vote. Buttigieg with 25.1% of the vote. Now, the reason they're coming out with like the 27 and the 26 has to do with the way that they weigh the various areas in Iowa. Not all of these places are created equal. There's a value system associated with it. So despite him winning the popular vote, which Democrats say are the most important thing in the world, he doesn't necessarily get the other tally. Let me ask you this. With all that you know, do you believe this is an unfortunate series of coincidences that has just allowed information to benefit the Buttigieg narrative of events, considering all that you know? Or do you think there's malfeasance? Or do you think there's a little bit of both? Meaning, do you think it's incompetence or do you think it's bias? Or do you think it's incompetence with bias taking advantage of it? Whatever you think this is, you're stuck with this unenviable position as a public who wants to know who won an election of never being able to know what happened fully from the standpoint of the result total in Iowa and not to know it flesh to bone You can only have this kind of, well, we think this is what it is. This is what they tell us it is. But it's different to know. And that's been botched completely. Even if Sanders wins this, I hope you understand what I mean. Like, if Sanders wins this, I would argue that they took this opportunity to ding Sanders to take the win out of the sales going into New Hampshire, and consequently to drag it out, meaning to leave enough doubt as you're going to the next part, because the 71%, they buried that at the State of the Union. I hope you understand what I mean. My argument was, if they start burying the information that's coming out and the things that's coming forward, it's clear they don't want people to pay attention to Iowa. So you have impeachment tomorrow. Will the information come out tomorrow during impeachment? I said this yesterday. Well, it came out during State of the Union. And if it comes out during impeachment again, the objective would be to bury this information, to slow down the front runner, to kill momentum, and to give the impression that Pete Buttigieg won something that he may not have won, to try to get a bump in New Hampshire for it, despite the fact that the vote total is not out. But the people are not going to entirely pay attention to the fact the vote total is not out. They're just going to look at what the media is saying currently. Because in their heads, he's ahead 27-25. He's not. He's not anything. We don't know what it is. And that's the problem. This benefits Pete. It seems to be a bias towards Pete. The messaging, how the information came out, how the information is being trickled out, all of that. The company owner, the fact that the company has a fiduciary relationship and a familial relationship with Pete Buttigieg, all of this looks a little dodgy. The fact Pete Buttigieg gets the Iowa registry poll killed, possibly because he looked horrible in that particular poll, and Joe Biden screaming, hey, don't put out half of the numbers, I look horrible in this. But in the DNC's numbers and in Sanders' numbers, not just that, the energy on the ground, Biden did horribly. So Biden is probably going to be in fourth. The question becomes, what are the actual numbers for the top two? Warren is not in contention, so it's somewhat of a moot point. And why does this process unfolding like this? I'll leave it here. I don't want this one to be overtly long. Xavier Foster, realizing nothing will change, Sanders will never fight back because that's his role, a doormat. Progressives will encourage the DNC via their vote. Well, yes and no. I mean, if you notice, Sanders, yeah, I disagree with that. So all of us screaming about cheating and everything else, why do you think he behaved this way? Think of what was taking place. I mean, to some degree, he showed the DNC as a sham. How do you cheat a guy with an application? You realize that if this was a regular election, you would not have this feedback. Meaning you would know. They would come out with a number, they'd go with the number, and they'd run. There would be none of this back and forth. Fact of the matter is, Sanders had minders and people looking at the various campaigns. All of the campaigns had other people looking at the various campaigns. Why wouldn't they? It's a caucus. You can be there. You can take your numbers down and you can send the numbers back. And so if the DNC is coming out with numbers dramatically different than Sanders, well, that's a problem. Why are your numbers dramatically different than Sanders? Again, take a litany of the people who want to stop the guy. What took place in 2016, the onus is on them to show some level of transparency. That was the entire point of this particular caucus and the way this was supposed to go. Yeah, you fucked that up. Sanders, coming out with his numbers, preempts the DNC's 50%. He comes out with 60%. He didn't wait for them to impose a narrative, meaning he didn't wait for them to impose these numbers. He put out his own numbers. The DNC puts out 62%, because if you're going to show Buttigieg is ahead, and you're going to compete with Sanders' numbers where you have to have a little bit more to show that he's ahead with a 2%. The rub of it is, though, they said they only had 50%. They found magically another 12%. They didn't find anything. They had all the numbers. They're selectively putting them out. Sanders preempted them because he wanted to get the public to be aware that, look, these are the numbers that we have in our internal polls. Let the DNC put their numbers out and you can make your own comparisons about who you trust. He's not taking it down. That's my point. He didn't, lay down on this. He was actually proactive. When is there some grounds to sue the DNC? Or as I would argue that there were grounds to sue the DNC last time. That's why Beck had the DNC fraud lawsuit. Initially, they threw it out. He brought it back. And apparently, it is still going through the court system. What is the function of this app? So the function of this app was supposed to be to fight disinformation and to make it easier to send the numbers and tallies to the various Democratic people. This is The Verge. This is the article discussing the app. And this article is astonishing in the things that they're saying that these guys allowed. Listen to this. This is The Verge. Right. New York Times reported that many precinct chiefs had trouble simply downloading the app, and Motherboard screenshot give hints as to why that might be. The app was not deployed through traditional app stores or even side-loaded using Enterprise Certificate. Instead, it was deployed using TestFurry's testing platform, which is similar to Apple's TestFlight, and used predominantly for Android and iOS apps that are not yet finalized. I'm a software engineer. What that means is, you don't necessarily build everything that you use. It's kind of like a car and a muffler. In software, we call them objects. Now, they're conceptual objects, but they're objects nonetheless. They have properties. They have things that they actually do. So like a muffler, it's like, what's the job of a muffler? Well, you can take a muffler and you can replace a muffler. It's an object. It's something unto itself. Software builds its systems out in similar ways. So let's say if you had a dog, you might have a method or a function to bark. Dog, bark. You can take it even further, call it an animal, and you can give it other characteristics to make it a dog, cat, whatever. Now you might say, that's a little weird, that's conceptual. Yeah, but from the digital standpoint, or the software standpoint, these are objects. They're solid in a digital space, not solid in our physical world. You purchase apps sometimes because they do something. So I might say, look, I don't want to have to build out this particular piece of software. So I can buy an app that does explicitly that. That app will function with my own system and we can work it from there. In this case, they were using something that was not set for deployment. In using an app, sometimes you want to try it as a test run. They were using test apps as opposed to the enterprise level apps. Testing apps restricts what you can do with the app. Say, for instance, I get an app that does pictures. Maybe they processes pictures into PDFs or something. Well, they may say, all right, you can use this, but you can only use this twice. Or you can use this, but there's going to be a bar on it. It's something that restricts the use to force the person to buy it if they like it. They never bought it. They were using a test app. Now, are they that incompetent, or was that done intentionally to create chaos? I would probably wager they were just that incompetent. Not to mention the level of corruption and this kind of seedy corporate thing to build an app for something that was entirely unnecessary. And then to have the added fuck up of having a fiduciary relationship with one of the people that's in the race. All of this stinks. All of it stinks. Right here. Shadow used a free tier of testing platform to distribute a critical mobile app. Think of critical meaning you need that app to work. You need it to work efficiently. And yeah, you got to buy it. They didn't buy it. They ran a Democratic primary to choose the President of the United States on a testing system. Yeah, that's where we're at. That's where we're at. All right, this has gone massively long. It's late at night when real men can't sleep. Real men do the news. I saw the 71% come out. Bernie Sanders up 0.1. What's his name? Buttigieg. Cheat Buttigieg, or Cheat Pete, or Pete the Cheat, whatever you want to call it, down 0.1. In a district where Bernie was beating Pete by 3.2, officials opted for a coin flip. Double side for Pete. All right. So they're telling us that it's all fair, it's all even. Listen to this. Listen to what's her name opines.
The Democratic debate stage in Nevada, and Weaver said in part, quote, that's the definition of a rigged system. Do you agree, or do you think that that word is being thrown around way too much? And the Sanders campaign should back off it as well because it's hurting faith in the system.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Your issue is the faith in the system, not the efficacy of the system. I hope you get the difference. People need
Just the other day, his senior advisor
believe in it. It doesn't need to work. You are insane. If there is something wrong where your system looks corrupt, that's a problem. And the person who's calling it out is not the bad guy. The person who's calling it out is the one that pointing to you and saying you have no clothes. The notion that CNN, mouthpiece of the government, will get on and say, hey, you guys shouldn't call a rigged system rigged. We don't like that. You're undermining the faith in our rigged system. If your name is Bernie Sanders, the system looks rigged. He should call it out, and he should call it what it is. And I appreciate that he does. Look at the coin flip that determines how delegates gets distributed. This actually happened. This is a real video.
What you're watching. And then flip it over. Flip it over. Heads. What you're watching. And then flip it over. Flip it over.
I hope you saw that.
Heads.
I hope you saw that. I hope you saw what he did. A coin flip. The weirdest, weakest, strangest, almost forced, intentional coin flip I've ever seen in my life.
I can.
Alright, so Buttigieg will get.
He literally flipped a coin, grabbed it, looks like he was looking if it, bloop. Yeah, it goes to Buttigieg. What? Now, if you are a Sanders person, you should have been there howling at the moon. You should have no trust to give. And that's the point I'm making here. You should have been howling at the fucking moon. Whoa. What kind of fucking coin flip is that? You should have been dropping F-bombs and all. Be divisive. That's fuckery. Look at what the guy did. I mean, for fuck's sake. Look at this. Like, it's astonishing that that's allowed. He effectively put the coin in a spot to give it to Buttigieg. You don't believe me?
3 delegates.
What you're watching. And then flip it over. Flip it over. And then flip it.
He has the coin. He has the coin. Now, at this point, instead of just dropping it on the floor, instead of just grabbing and flipping it, it looks as if he's looking at the coin. Let's do this again. All right, right? All right, you got it. Now, what you're supposed to do is just put it on the back of your hand. You know, whatever that is, it is. Look at what he does, though. Look at what he does. What are you doing, dude? What are you doing, dog? That's not how you do a coin flip. That's not how you do a coin flip at all. I mean, you've effectively flipped the coin, caught it. Now, instead of you're like, that looks like you're trying to figure out what it is first. Don't trust me. Just look at him. Look at him. Look at what he's doing. He's pulling the coin down. He's going to get manual control of the coin now. All right, keep going. What are you doing, dog? You're holding that coin way too long. You're holding that coin way too long. Now he flips it over. But see, that's just the rub, right? It's supposed to be boom, boom. What the fuck is this? What is this? What is this? What is this? Come on. Now you figure it out. Now you figure it out. Let's just try it again. Let's I want to be able to go slower. But my point is, look at this. He's manually controlling the coin at this point. Right. Right. Who does that? Who does that? I mean, I don't think I don't have a coin here to try to make my point, but effectively, if I say, let's flip a coin, so use a top. Typically, it's boom. That's the point, right? It has to be quick because you don't want to take any time to figure out what that number is. He didn't do that. He did. I guess it's heads. Well, dude, that's not a coin toss. That's you intentionally choosing who you want to win that. Look at this. Right there. Right there. Why are you using your bottom hand? Why are you getting manual control? Flip. Boom. And then he's doing one of these. Oh, I see. It's this. And then he's like, look at this. He's putting his second hand in. Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Just flip it on. Dude, this looks bad for you. It just does. That looks bad. Now that you have control of it, possibly can even see it. Now you flip it over. Now you flip it over. After all of that fondling of the coin, now you flip it over. Totally fair. Totally fair. Totally fair. That totally looks fair to me. No issue. None. No issue. I saw it, was like, what the fuck is that? How do you do that? Maybe you should have training lessons in how to flip a coin in order to not look, you know, like you're, this is fucking nonsense. Yeah, that was a horrible, that's democracy in action. Democracy in action. We have the huevos to call Venezuela the Banana Republic. Who you telling? Who you telling? I tell you this, that looks horrendous. All right, I'm going to end this. Xavier Foster and Democrat voters put up with this nonsense. Amazing. That's the amazing part. Like, I heard Ben Dixon was like, you'll never get me to vote for Mayor Pete. Never, under no circumstances. But Sam Cedar would. Sam Cedar said he'd vote for a can of soup. Doesn't matter if they cheat him. He'd still vote for a can of soup and tell you to do the exact same thing. So, yeah, they still vote for that. The question becomes, did Pete win this? And will you ever know? Meaning, if anybody other than Sanders wins this, and the reason why I say anybody other than Sanders is because that's the guy who they definitely don't want to win. If the guy who they definitely don't want to win wins it, then you probably could say, okay, fair enough. They didn't want that guy to win. It's like, what are they going to do? Be working with Sanders to cheat Pete? I'm greatly skeptical of that. This stinks. That's all. It just stinks. You know, it's like, which part of this is conspiratorial? Which part of this is a conspiracy theory? Everything I said is true. Now, you could say, I don't think there's dark motives. Fair enough. That's my own opinion on that. But from the standpoint of the details, everything I've said here is true. All of it stinks. All of it stinks. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks all.